Continuing to do our season reviews here on One Soccer Today, and on the program for the next 15 minutes, a spotlight on the Vancouver Whitecaps and their 2024 season with Oliver Platt and Gareth Wheeler. Of course, the big shining story and an anniversary season, some fresh threads, a three-peat in the Canadian Championship, a decent little run in the postseason, some questions about a playoff format, and now a question about who will coach this team next. Lots of things to pick from to throw your dart at, Gareth Wheeler. But if you were to nominate one storyline from the British Columbians this season as the top storyline, what would that be?
Motocross. No, I can't.
The Spring and Garden Show.
That was something else. The Home and Garden Show. Two of their games not being able to play at home because of events booked in their stadium. Look, the 50th anniversary year, I think it was one where the team continued to take steps forward. Now, it might have not been enough steps forward or a big of enough step forward for some people's liking, but this was a team that it took a while, but added Stuart Armstrong. I thought that he was a really good addition and will be a good addition going forward. Most importantly, they won the Canadian Championship for the third consecutive year, a stated priority for Vanni Sartini. So they're going back to the CONCACAF Champions Cup yet again. Fell a little bit short. Their finish to the end of the regular season meant that they weren't on a club record point total, but they entered the playoffs, smashed their rival in the Portland Timbers, then over three legs actually won the aggregate tie against LAFC, but a ridiculous playoff format dumped them out. So I thought it was a B+ type of year for Vancouver Whitecaps. Unfortunately for some, they just required that A in the 50th anniversary season, and a team with some stars like Ryan Gauld and Andreas Kubas and Ranko Veselinovic, players that have become like really solid players, not only for Vancouver Whitecaps, but across Major League Soccer as well. So overall, a positive season for the Whitecaps for me.
And not to mention they got a little more Scottish, adding Stuart Armstrong. That excited the supporters in the postseason push as well. Curious to see how we can translate that into 2025. Oliver Platt, what was your number one storyline?
My number one storyline was that everything Gareth just talked about happened, and I would say generally there was a heightened level of enthusiasm around the team, great crowds, a lot of positivity. And then they sacked the manager, which I think is like a pretty unprecedented in terms of Whitecaps history, having a season that good and the head coach losing their job at the end of the year, which in a bitterly ironic way, I guess is somewhat a testament to what Vanni Sartini has done and others at the club have achieved over the past few years, but speaks to the level of expectation that's there now. You know, they outscored their opponents 9-3 in the playoffs. They won the Canadian Championship for a third year in a row. And that was deemed at the end of the season to be not good enough. So that's obviously a big statement moving forward as to what this club now expects. But yeah, that's the storyline for me, is that we're in a very different place than we have been with the Whitecaps previously in their MLS history, that's the level that's being required now at this club.
I'd like to maybe investigate that just a little bit further, Ollie. Do you think the surprise in that is totally normal? Is that okay though? If you're a Cap supporter, are you okay with that? You're saying, okay, we're still ascending, maybe not as slow or as big a dramatic a leap as perhaps they'd like to see. But if you're them, are you sort of saying, is now the time to rock the boat? Or are you a Cap supporter in this hypothetical saying, yeah, let's go, Axel, let's keep pushing. Let's want more, not be satisfied with these incremental gains?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're sad to see Vanni Sartini go because he was so popular and well loved at that club. But ultimately, as a supporter of the club, you want to see your club trying to win it all, right? Trying to hit a six and go for it. And I think you can't really criticize the Whitecaps in that sense, that they do seem to be showing more intent than they've shown in the past to go and do that. We'll see if they're successful. It's a big decision. It's not without risk, but I don't think you can fault them for trying.
I think the analogy that Jordan Wilson might have used it on the show was the equivalent of where the Toronto Raptors were before they won an NBA title. They brought in Nick Nurse instead of doing. Was that you? It was a good one, Ollie, because sometimes you need to take a little bit of a risk take yourself out of a comfortable situation in order for your team to take a step forward. So I'm trying to push aside my really positive bias towards keeping Vanni Sartini out of the equation here and understanding the method here. Axel Schuster hasn't had the opportunity to go handpick his head coach, who's going to be execute to the best of the ability of the squad that he's assembling. Now he's going to have that opportunity. It comes with risk. He needs to get it right, but this is maybe how you make that next jump or make a bigger jump in terms of something even better from this club as a collective.
Okay, so let's address that coaching question in particular a little bit later, but it's no doubt one of the priorities, Gareth, this offseason for them to continue to refine the roster, who's going to stay, who's going to go. All the clubs right now, as we get closer and closer to the end of 2024, as we tape, the announcements are coming. We're starting to get a clear picture of who's in, who's out, and what's to come. You could pick the coach. I would totally allow it because it's a very understandable and obvious answer. But I'm wondering if there's something else you think, or is the coach just the number one offseason priority?
No, I think they need more production from young players. Ali Ahmed, I think that his form for Canada, we didn't always see it with the Whitecaps this year. He was in and out of the starting 11. I think that Berhalter did make a significant step, but I still think that there's room for growth from young players within the squad. If it's not going to come from in the academy, maybe they can use the under-22 initiative to bring in another exciting attacking player. Just with players like Krylak and, Armstrong's 32 and Gauld's 28 and Brian White's 28, like a lot of players in that mold. I think they need a little bit more dynamic play from attacking areas. So I think getting a little bit younger there would take this team a long way. They have the 3 DPs now, so that's the way that you address that issue. So I think they need a little bit more production from younger players in the squad to really help them go forward. I just look at the Galaxy, like Gabriel Peck, like, wow, on top of like established players in that team, it's sometimes having those young players that kind of take you up another level or two.
Ali, what say you?
Yeah, it's somewhat similar, I think. I think maybe it's time to like refresh the depth of the squad a little bit. Like towards the end of the season, they had some injury issues. White went down for a bit. Gauld went down for a bit. Armstrong was still being integrated. And obviously, you're not going to get the same level of performance and the same results when those players are out as when they're there. But they fell off a cliff. Like they lost 5 of their last 7 games and didn't win any of them. When they were having to rely a bit more on the depth of the squad. So I'd say refreshing some of the players beyond like the key guys. I don't think they're going to change, or I don't think they want them to change at least. But beyond that, I think it's maybe time for some new bloods that can hold down the fort when they're not available.
Well, these 13 minutes or these several minutes so far leading up to this point in the show, and that is a little bit of prognostication time. New coach will be hired. Roster will be addressed. Perhaps they do add a few new pieces, but with that move that Axel Schuster makes to part ways with Vanni Sartini, he's kind of putting his chips towards the center of the table here and hoping for continued progression. Would that be your prediction, excuse me, Ollie, that this team will progress? Do you think might be hovering around where they are right now, or is it even the nuclear option and that they regress in 2025?
I mean, I think the most likely option, just because of the teams they're competing against and the state of that Western Conference and just the sheer number of teams in MLS these days, is that they stay roughly the same. But I think there is a better chance that they take a step forward than a step back. So again, it's worth a gamble, I think, to try and shake things up and take that next step. We're going to have to see who that next head coach is. I think there's a very different range of options that they could decide on in terms of domestic coaches, foreign coaches, experienced, younger. That'll be a big call. And then, like I said, I don't see there being like massive changes to the core group of this squad. I think it's more what they can do around it. Can different young players take a step forward? Things like that will really influence where they are at the end of 2025.
Unless they lose players, like I know there's been some talk about like Kubas and whether he's settled or not there. Like if they lose a player like him, again, Berhalter played much better this year, but he's a foundational piece of the side. So we'll see where they end up. Like, are they willing to let go of maybe some players that they have to bring in better or different? Brian White, I think, fits that category. Can you do better than? I mean, he's been such a crucial part of this team going forward, but he'd be coveted throughout Major League Soccer. He's a domestic player. Like he ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of teams, so his value is exceptionally high across Major League Soccer. The other problem for the Vancouver Whitecaps is the West is loaded. Galaxy are loaded. LAFC are loaded. Seattle's always going to be good. The attacking talent that plays in Portland, like go through the list. There's ambitious clubs. Minnesota, St. Louis will want to hit the reset button and take a step forward. Like the Western Conference is going to be very difficult. So I think there's no choice. They need to make a step forward. They need to get this hire right, and perhaps someone that can fully take advantage of the system that the Vancouver Whitecaps play. That's essential. And they need some players to stay fit. Like Sam Adekubi needs to be on the field playing, because when he is, he's a difference maker in this team as well. So some of the pieces are there, but Oliver's right to a certain degree. Maybe the backfill, like maybe the depth chart, the depth of the squad needs to be addressed a little bit more. Some positional needs most certainly are there.
Well, we're inching incrementally closer to the big question. But before we get there, Gareth alludes to it. There's always been, with the people that interact with him on a day-to-day basis, this positive, maybe not bias, but definitely this positive feeling, this positive emotion around interaction with Vanni Sartini and the type of character that he was in Canadian soccer. Gareth, if you were to sort of boil it down to one memory or one emotion or one thought, how will you remember Vanni Sartini in his time with the Whitecaps?
Tarps off, baby, like swinging over the top of his head. Is pure joy around the game and winning and what it meant to be part of this. I mean, it's admirable. He's just such a likable, honest figure as well. I think he regularly spoke out for the little guy. He was an advocate of Canadian soccer and the structures that exist. He treated members of the media with absolute respect and trust. He just represented so much good in the game. And that's my big takeaway, is that we need more people like this involved in Canadian football in one way, shape, or form. So Sartini will be missed. I think that his influence on the field as well will be missed again, but it's just about taking the team in a different direction. I don't think it's an indictment on Vanni Sartini. I just think it's about the team going in a different direction.
Ollie, to add?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different things you could say about him, but kind of what stands out to me is that he's someone who, came from somewhere else in the world, but didn't just see Vancouver or Canadian football as like a stop on his journey of wherever he's going to end up. Like, he really embraced Vancouver. He really embraced Canada as a footballing country, and like made an effort, I think, to embed himself in that in a bunch of different ways, which I think just speaks to what kind of character he is. And then brought back at a difficult time for the Whitecaps. It was one big part of bringing back positivity to the club, like a club that you wanted to support, I think, as a supporter in that city and root for, which hadn't been the case for a little while. So he had an enormous impact that I think will continue to be felt in any success they have going forwards.
Okay, big shoes to fill. It's the question that Whitecap fans are wondering right now. It's a question we're going to ask. We've got to ask Ollie, who replaces him?
I think, like, the guy I would think that they will want is Jim Curtin. I just don't think they'll be the only MLS club feeling that way with his track record at Philadelphia. He just seems to fit them and the model that they operate under in a lot of different ways. He's proven and has had success in this league. There's some other MLS names you could throw out there. Savarese's been linked to a bunch of jobs for a while since leaving Portland, hasn't taken one yet. Carnell at St. Louis City had a very good first season, not so good last year. And then obviously you get onto, could Tommy Wooden Jr. or Bobby Simoniotis turn their heads? Could a foreign candidate be what they go for? I think it's very open and difficult to say at the time we're talking right now.
I think he's got to go with a foreign candidate, with all due respect to those domestic options. I mean, just bring over someone that Axel Schuster has a relationship with, and he has relationships with individuals overseas, someone that preferably plays that 3-4-3 formation. Like, I wouldn't want to move away from that if I was a new manager coming in. But I think that because Vancouver, it's an international city in Major League Soccer, that I think it makes sense to bring in an international head coach to give him a little bit more flair, maybe a little bit of a different perspective as well, than other MLS clubs, because the Canadian teams operate differently than those American clubs. There's no doubt about that. So that's what I'd like to see. Just Schuster trust his phone book. Do people have phone books anymore? Trust his
virtual Rolodex,
his contact list. Yeah, his Rolodex, and go from there.
All right. Are either of you willing to say
phone book
for Pete? on the table for next year? Can champ unprecedented four-peat? Anyone? Can I get either of you to nibble to take a little
I'll do it.
suggestion?
They're 100% the favorite. 100%.
Yeah.
I'll go 4P. Yes.
And we will see them in CONCACAF Champions Cup yet again just down the road. One Soccer Today Whitecaps special. Thanks for joining us, everybody.